Mike having started school once again, this time at Burckhalter Elementary, walking the equivalent of 10 city blocks, his home located in the 7900 block and the school the 6900 block. Because of his earlier fractured skull injury, he started school in late April, joining the January midterm class. He discovered his 1947 class was somewhat smaller than most, 31 students in all, 16 boys and 15 girls. A reason for the size could possibly be attributed to being a midterm class. Because of his late enrollment, being a transfer student from Melrose, the semester had already begun. Arriving with his mother that first day, the class in session, he was introduced to Mrs. Drury and the first grade class. So Mike Wilson once again began his educational journey, destined to spend the next 6 years with his newly acquainted classmates at Burckhalter. The school building adjacent to Sunnymere Avenue was new, having opened the previous fall semester. The original building, which stood parallel to Burckhalter Avenue, still remained. It looked at age, barren and standing, boarded up with a haunted look. One morning, being late for school, the playground vacant, Mike noticed at the old building, the normally locked and fastened door chain hanging loose, and did the unthinkable. Entering the building, briefly pausing in the hallway, experiencing the stillness of the darkened hall that once hosted generations of students. Realizing what he'd done, making a hasty retreat, the shortness of breath subsiding, a feeling of accomplishment pulsated through him. After the removal of the old building that summer, he would never forget that visit of being in the forlorn empty building. He reasoned it was because of the secret they shared. The first grade at Burckhalter was a reflection of American heritage. Each morning the class would stand, place the right hand over their heart, facing the flag, and recite the Pledge of Allegiance. Monday morning were designated as sharing or show and tell time. Those who desired could stand up in front of the class and share a weekend outing or something they had brought from home. The class's first book, Fun with Dick and Jane, a reader that was introduced to the school classrooms in the 1930s. At Burckhalter, normal progression for a class would be one teacher for each semester, the semesters designated as L, low, for first semester, and H, high, for the second, normally not having the same teacher for 2 consecutive semesters. There were exceptions, and with the advent of the 4th, 5th, and 6th grade there was additional instructors for band, music and other non-curricular activities. With the curriculum came the introduction of numerical addition and subtraction, the elucidations, and penciling of the written word. Later, with the class advancing in grade level, they experienced the convention of penmanship, the ritual of filling the desktop ink wells, the passing out of the pens, instructions on the proper holding position, and the practice of cursive and slant. Mike soon making a discovery. By volunteering to pass out the pens in class, he could retain one with a perfect point, thus ensuring better penmanship. Along with the grade advancement, there was the inevitable homework assignments, the all-important spelling list handed out to be studied at home, and the notorious spelling and arithmetic pop quiz. School was like a giant puzzle, the enlightenment of discovery and fitting the pieces into perfect precision, and sometimes spurning a captivating interest like listening to a never-ending favorite radio program. The boy found that fervency of life was everywhere. All you had to do was seek it. Listening to the radio was his door to the world of adventure. The Lone Ranger, Cisco Kid, Superman, Straight Arrow, Sky King, Gang Busters, I Love a Mystery, the list was never ending. He emulated his heroes in games as most kid would do and explored their world, and behold, it opened his eyes to all that surrounded him. There was a sense of aspiration in the little things that surrounded one, the clouds, the stars, the wind, and even walking to school in the rain, his slicker and rain boots protecting him. The ending 4 blocks of Greenlee Drive having no sidewalks and the rain puddles were like little lakes to sail ice cream sticks on, skim rocks across, or splash with his wadding boots. In a heavy rain the water would gush down the open culvert on the steep hill of Shone Avenue, with a roar and bellow over the covered openings under the cross streets, sending it into the air like a raging river. On the way to school, journeying by the waterworks, adjacent to a bus stop was a large 3-tiered decorative fountain that had been placed within the fenced area among the pines. On many occasions the plant employees would leave the water circulating through the fountain. One winter day there was an unusual event in the city. A hard freeze occurred and huge ice icicles formed and hung from the different fountain tiers like sword blades. Mike, having never experienced this aspect of nature, was mesmerized with the event. It was something that needed to be shared with others. He located an area along the fence line where he could crawl under and proceeded to do just that. The ice icicle was cold, but he could sacrifice discomfort for what he had to do. A proud bearer carried his melting icicle to school to show everyone his trophy. The school library was on the 2nd floor and available, but he soon discovered the real treasure source was 1 block from the school, the Gibson branch of the Oakland Public Library system. On a scheduled basis the class would form a line outside and march down the sidewalk to the Gibson Library. Once inside, the librarian, Mrs. Salo, would assemble the class, arousing their interest by reading an excerpt from an exciting story. Once the reading session was completed, the class was on their own to browse. The atmosphere of the library was mystifying, an echo of solitude resonating to a point where you could hear your thoughts, or so it seemed. The varied fragrance of the bound multitude, an air of leather, the musty smell of damp parchment serving notice of a presence, a wealth of stored knowledge, its exploration a young person's adventure. On the corner of Greenlee Drive and Edwards Avenue, directly across from Burckhalter, was a family-owned small convenience store. It was the place where you purchased the authentic necessities such as gum or candy before or after school. It also was where the younger students got their real education from those older students who presented the facts as the gospel, having acquiring their knowledge from the previous older students. Important issues were relayed, such as the anatomy of the body and reproduction of the species. The facts of life being detailed in a vernacular never before heard by a 3rd or 4th grader. The pride and prejudice concerning the importance of the world to those under 12 were discussed, opinions and ideals formulated, some even shocking, but most to be lost or forgotten on the walk home from school. Through the grades he trekked, acquiring skills needed for goals and tasks before him. School sports for the most part were all intramural, but discovering that participating in after-school sports activities sponsored by the Oakland Recreation Department could be rewarding. It was symbolized by granting those attaining a certain level of participation could earn a Block B and a trip to a University of California football game at Berkeley. Mike's after-school pursuit achieving this goal, attending his first football game with several others in 1951. Other activities he participated in included the school traffic patrol, which provided uniformed insignia hats for participants to sling their signs and halt traffic at the two school intersections as guardians of safety. Before exiting his tenure at Burckhalter, Mike was subject to a monumental task thrust upon him by an unexpected person, Mr. Hayden, his 6th grade teacher. The students of Mr. Robert Hayden's low 6th grade class were asked to suggest classmates' names for the position of student council president for their upcoming final fall semester. Several classmate names were submitted, but to Mr. Hayden's dismay, for some reason all the boys declined. Having not raised his hand, Mike, suddenly hearing his name spoken, put in nomination, but not by a student, but by none other than Mr. Hayden, his teacher. Upon hearing his name given, he followed suit and immediately declined, but his declension was rebuked by the instructor, followed by a list of acolytes why he should accept. Mike finally giving in. His opponents for the presidency would be the two most popular girls in the class, Marion Wheeler and Janet Romer. From his viewpoint, his election attempt for president would be futile, but because of only 3 candidates, he was assured either the vice presidency or council secretary position. The students eligible to vote in the election were members of the 4th, 5th, and 6th grade classes, each class having 2 representatives in the student council. Most of the 4th and 5th grade classrooms occupied the old portable buildings moved in during the war, these buildings having oil-burning stoves and wooden floors. Mike, having written a prefatory presentation on an index card, and when entering the portables to introduce yourself as a candidate, finding it was a very audible experience, especially for someone wearing horseshoe taps on his shoes. In fact, some teachers bringing it to Mike's attention, asking him to re-enter the room in a quieter mode. This in turn brought a humorous reaction from the kids in the class, drawing more attention to his campaign. Mike, suspecting after the ballots were counted, that this event was what won him the election, Marion serving as vice president and Janet as secretary. Part of his duties as president of the student council was to conduct the scheduled school assemblies, each program starting with the Pledge of Allegiance and the playing of the national anthem by the school orchestra. It was these stage appearances that instilled in him a confidence of stature and public speaking. Upon completion, his elementary school grand finale was a surprise to his classmates and those in attendance, he and Johnny Youngblood performing a piano duet and each a solo composition at the graduation festivities.